Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, cha, bonjour, namaste, jumbo. Bienvenidos. Hey, my name is Jedley. Welcome to Reading with Your Kids. We're coming to you from the beautiful, wonderful, historical neighborhood of Reedville, located in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We're so very honored and absolutely delighted that you're joining us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. We do that by sharing fun, thoughtful, and thought-provoking conversations with fascinating people who just happen to be writing books for kids of all ages. You can join us in that mission by telling all of your family and friends about the show and letting them know that they can hear us on the WREB AM/FM 24/7 radio network, and they can find us on the iHeartRadio app, on GoodPod, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, wherever you find your favorite shows. We have a wonderful show lined up for you today. Hayley Chewins will be here to celebrate her new YA novel in verse. It's called I Am the Swarm. And later in the show, we'll be taking a listen back to a wonderful conversation we had with Kate DiCamillo. This episode of Reading with Your Kids is brought to you by We're Going to the Dinosaur Forest, written by Marie Nichols. Marie Nichols was recently on my Connecticut Book Festival's podcast, and what a delightful woman. One of the things she said really struck home with me. She said, parents nurture with care, siblings are taught to share, but grandparents embrace the dares. We're Going to the Dinosaur Forest is a colorful, fun-filled book where this grandmother dares to embark on a wild journey with her grandson into the dinosaur forest. It's available on Amazon. It's also available on bookshop.org. You and your kids and you and your grandkids are going to love this book. It's We're Going to the Dinosaur Forest, written by Marie Nichols. Join us right now from the wonderful nation of South Africa. Our guest is here today to celebrate her new novel, YA novel in verse. It's called I Am the Swarm. Please welcome to the show, Hayley Chewins. Hey, Hayley, how are you?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
Wonderful. What a title. I Am the Swarm. It's conjures up all sorts of images in my head.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great title.
Yeah.
I didn't come up with it, so I can say that because it wasn't the original title of the book. It was a title that my editor came up with, and it's brilliant.
Yes. Hayley and I were just chatting about that before we hit record. Interesting. I think a lot of people, especially young or new writers, new to selling manuscripts, are very surprised sometimes when they sell a manuscript and they learn that this isn't mine anymore. This now belongs to the publishing company.
Yeah. Yeah, but hopefully it's a kind of a joyful collaboration rather than someone sort of beating your work into a shape that you don't want it to be in. Like we were saying before, I think if you work with a great editor, then their job really is to make your work shine. So a great editor will see your work and want it to be the best that it can possibly be and help you to get it there.
Yeah. Well, my job is to help you tell people all about this book. So tell us, who are we going to meet in this I Am the Swarm?
Okay, so I Am the Swarm is about Nell. She's 15 and she lives in Cape Town, South Africa. And she comes from a family where all the women have some kind of magical power. So when they turn 15, they inherit this magic. And it's not the kind of magic that sort of makes your life easier or gives you sort of an edge. It's more the kind of magic that just complicates everything. So for instance, her mother, her age changes constantly, at whim. It's not under her control at all. So 1 second she'll be, the age that she actually is, which is 43. And then the next second she might be 17 or she might be 25. And then Nell's older sister, Maura, bleeds music. So she has started to harm herself in order to sort of release this music and to hear it. And so at the beginning of the book, Nell's about to get her magic. And when she gets it, it sort of slowly unfolds that her emotions, when she has a really strong feeling, it manifests around her as insects. And it takes her a while to figure that out, to figure out what's actually happening. And when she does, she realizes there's some insects that she feels really, really uncomfortable having around. And so she starts to try to control what feelings she has and which feelings she expresses.
Well, I gotta dig into this a little bit. These magical powers, they're more hideous than the one before. At first when you're talking about the mom changing age, and at a whim, and I just imagine myself, changing into a 16-month-old baby, out of the And then the sister bleeds music, and and I'm thinking, well, it can't get any worse than that. But I don't know. There are a lot of creepy crawlies that I wouldn't want around me, and I want to have some control over them.
Yeah, exactly. It is, like I said, it's magic that's more, Nell sees it more as a curse than a blessing. But you'll see that throughout the book, she realizes that this is sort of a part of her life and she has to make peace with it. And also that there are some parts of it that are a blessing, even if sometimes it feels like a curse.
Coming up with these ideas, did it keep you up at night? Did you go to bed and, just dream like, oh my goodness, I got bugs crawling all over me because I'm feeling sad?
I think I do sometimes. I've always had a really vivid imagination. So sometimes things do come from dreams. And this story, I've had little pieces of it in my head for a very, very long time. And it took a while for the pieces to sort of come together, and then they became this story. But I always wanted to write a story about a girl who bled music. I just thought that was such an interesting idea. I've been thinking about that for about a decade, but I didn't know what the story would be or how to fit it into a story. And then around 2019, I had this idea that maybe of this idea of this family of women who they'd have magical powers, but the powers would just be sort of irrational and suffocating, because I think so much of the time, I guess it's been my experience that a lot of the things that really make us who we are, especially before we make peace with them, they can feel really complicating. They can feel like things that actually just make our life more difficult, or things that make us feel separate from other people, or make us feel like there's something wrong with us. And I think a lot of the time when I'm writing, I'm trying to explore a kind of psychological state or how we are in relationship with other people. And often I find this language around magic to be a really powerful way to talk about how those things feel.
It's really fascinating. The idea that, sometimes we feel separated from others, that is a frightening thing for me to think about. We talk a lot about, especially here on Reading with Your Kids and teaching our kids not to other people and not to exclude people. But then when, reverse that and think about all the times that we choose to kind of other ourselves and see ourselves as separate from our communities.
Yes.
That's tough.
That is really tough. Yeah, it is really tough. I think this is really a book. In many ways, it's a book about loneliness. And yeah, it's a book. It's the most personal book I've written. I've published 2 books before, middle grade books that are magical also. They're fantasy books. They don't really take place in the real world. They're more in like an invented sort of magical world. And similar themes, I think as a writer, you're always kind of returning to whether you like it or not, you're kind of returning to themes over and over. And I think one of the things that we belong and how we sort of know ourselves and figure out our identity and accept ourselves. And I forgot what I was saying. Oh, yeah. So I Am the Swarm is the most personal book I've written. It's very much based on things that happened in my adolescence. And a big part of that is feeling really lonely because something that you can't share with other people, or that maybe you've tried to share it, but it's difficult for other people to receive it. And because of Nell's magic, she does feel very separate from other people at school, from even sometimes from her mom. So yeah, I think it's something that's very close to my heart that I think about a lot. And I especially want for children and for teenagers to feel that they do have somewhere to belong, and that, no matter what's going on, they can somehow find connection, because as human beings, we need connection. We all desperately need it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know you were sharing with me before we started recording that you are a mom to a 6-month-old baby, and so you'll never be lonely again.
That's true.
But how did you? What took you from that place where you were feeling isolated and lonely to where you are now, a loving, happy mom? Was it just something that you grew into, or were there steps that you took to kind of help you get there?
Oh, wow. That's a very big question. I have been going to therapy for a long time, and I think that's really, really helped, just to have this really safe space of someone allowing you to talk about things and to share feelings with them in a non-judgmental way. I actually think no matter what your experience, I think every human being can benefit from that. It's just such a profound, beautiful experience. And I have been really lucky in that I've had people in my life who have been able to find me and to connect with me. And I've been able to be myself with them. And just slowly over time, I think I've been able to accept myself more and be more gentle with myself. I'm obviously, no one's perfect, and I have to still work on it and everything. The other thing that really helped me to I think feel more comfortable in my skin and to counteract that sense of loneliness was writing. So I'd always written, literally from when I was 4 years old. I think that's when I wrote my first story. I actually still have it, and it's quite cool to read that. But I've always written, and it's always been a way that I can be, I guess it's been a way to find myself, to express what I couldn't express to other people or out loud speaking. It's always felt like a safe space for me, and I think it has been very therapeutic for me.
Mm-hmm. Why did you choose to write this YA novel in verse?
Well, partly it was just a creative, almost felt like a creative imperative, like it had to be that way. That's just the way it came out. But I've actually always wanted to write a novel in verse. The first book I ever queried, trying to find representation from a literary agent, was a novel in verse. And I just love reading them. Really powerful about writing in verse and being able to sort of be much more playful with language, and also to play with space and line breaks. There's so much that you can say without saying, without using many words. I find poetry and verse very powerful. So that was kind of why I wanted to do it. But to be honest, it just felt right to write it that way. Sometimes a project just has to be the way it is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We always encourage families to continue to read with their kids long after they're independent readers. And I think there's a lot of value in families reading aloud middle grade novels, YA titles, but also co-reading together. What kind of conversations do you think families could have if they choose to co-read I Am the Swarm?
That's a wonderful question. I would absolutely love it if people chose to co-read this book. I think it would be, I would love to hear about that if that does happen. I think the conversations would probably be things around mental health. There are some really difficult topics in this book that people should be aware of. I mean, the content warnings are in the beginning of the book. So, it's a book that touches on sexual harassment. It's a book that touches on depression and anxiety and self-harm. So those would be things that I know those are difficult things to talk about sometimes, but I think if you talk about it in relation to a story, it can open up a way to talk about it that is a little bit easier, because you can talk about characters and situations in a book, and scenes and how things made you feel without necessarily talking about it directly, like about yourself. Although it would also be wonderful if that opened up conversations and safe spaces for people to talk about things that they've struggled with in that way. Yes, so I think it would also be an interesting way to talk about sister relationships or relationships in general, relationships between children and parents, what parents need and what children need, and how we can feel safe in our relationships.
Yeah. You know, as you were speaking about the different things families can talk about, I'm imagining there might be one parent out there that hears, oh, it can open up conversations about self-harm. I can imagine some parents go, okay, well, I'm going to stay away from that because I don't want to talk about that with anybody, never mind my kid. But
absolutely, yeah.
if you're
I understand that.
way, if you're feeling that way, you gotta do it, you know, because it's so important that our kids know that they can talk to us about these difficult issues and know that we can help them get the help they might need.
Yes. Oh, I totally agree. And I wanted to say I do have sympathy for that. I know it's difficult to talk about these topics. I know it's difficult to talk about things that are can be so disturbing and so upsetting. And maybe it's not for everyone, and also maybe it's not for everyone at every time. You know, maybe you have to find the right time I also think books find you at the right time. You need to read things sort of, you know, when you're open to it. So I understand that. And also I agree with you that I think that to imagine that our children aren't touched by these things, in some way is unrealistic. I think that we all at some point will probably go through a stage of needing help, our relationships or with our confidence. It could be something like that. And I think that to feel that your parent accepts you unconditionally and can listen to you and sort of can be there for you and is willing to look at the hard stuff with you, I think that can be really life-giving and really helpful for the relationship.
Yeah. I'm curious. I've been a performer for most of my adult life, and so I am always aware of my audiences and as I perform my magic. I'm curious, are you consciously thinking about the readers as you're crafting your book?
Honestly, no, I'm not. I usually write. I think it's different for different writers, but for me, I'm so much in a flow of making the thing that I want to make that I'm not thinking, I can't think too far ahead about who's going to read it or what anyone's going to think, whether that's my literary agent or an editor or a reader down the line. I think in order to write well, I have to write what I want to write, and I have to write something that's really deeply resonating within me. And sometimes I feel that almost like as a kind of electricity inside me, like it has to give me this really energizing, kind of, electric feeling. And so that's what guides me when I'm writing. I don't look too far outside of what's happening right now between me and the words.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That must be a really frustrating at times, but also really thrilling feeling when that electricity is going and it's flowing and the verses are just coming. Can you describe how that feels?
Yeah, it is feeling alive. To me, that's what feeling alive feels like. I'm always looking for that feeling of being in flow and having something sort of pour out of me. And I don't want to give the impression that writing always feels like that way to me, because it doesn't. Some days I'm just at my desk and it feels like I'm pulling teeth and it's going really slowly and I don't know where I'm going. I feel lost, or I feel, usually in the middle of a project, I feel like giving up, and I feel like I don't know, it's kind of like being in the middle of a hike. You're like, we don't have the freshness of the beginning, but we also don't have a sense of we're getting somewhere. We're just sort of in this muddy middle and it's hard. But within that, there are always these extremely beautiful, magical moments. And those are the moments that keep me going. But this book actually was very different from anything else I'd written, in the sense that I didn't even really plot it. By that I mean, I didn't write out an outline and try and like wrangle the plot into a shape. I knew I had these threads, and I would just, it sounds really strange, but I would just sort of listen for which scene felt right next to come, like which scene should come next. And I did edit it, and it did take some work to get it in the shape it is now, but not nearly as much editing as I had to do on previous books. I think it was just the right time for me to write it. It had been sitting in my head. Like I said, part of it had been sitting in my head for over a decade. And it was just this confluence of elements, and it came out.
Yeah. Wonderful. And you mentioned earlier that you have written middle grade novels. Was it difficult to switch from writing for that audience to a YA audience?
That's so interesting. So actually previously, I love writing middle grade, and I never felt that I could write anything else. I didn't think that I would write YA because anytime I had an idea that sort of was YA and I tried to write one, it just didn't come out right, and I couldn't get the voice right. It didn't feel right to me. And how I described it to a friend was, if I'm like a house, I felt like I could, it's going to sound like a strange metaphor, but I felt like the middle grade me, like the 11-year-old me, was just in the next room. Like I could sort of I could just open the door and I could be there, and I could interact with her and understand her and have her voice in my head. Whereas the teenage me, like I kind of had to go through these weird little passages and like up into an attic and then down some stairs. I don't know. I just had to really, she was more difficult to find. But once I found her, and I don't mean me, but like my connection to me, because Nell isn't me, but I think in order to write YA, you have to remember on a bone deep level what it was like to be a teenager. Mm-hmm. So once I found that connection again, it just flowed.
Wonderful. That's really, I just love tapping in and learning about other people's creative process, because they're so different. Mm-hmm. What's next for you? Do you have a project? Can you give us a glimpse? I know a lot of people don't like to talk about their works in project, but can you give us an idea of what might be coming next from you?
Yes, I will have to check if I can talk about this publicly, but I have a middle grade novel that we've sold that hasn't been announced yet. So I'm not sure if I can talk about it.
No, we don't want you to get in trouble. But I do.
But yes, I'm writing another middle grade fantasy.
Awesome.
And I'm really excited about it.
Well, you are most welcome to come back and celebrate that book when you're able to.
I would love that. I would absolutely love that.
We should tell everybody where they can go to find out more about I Am the Swarm and find out more about you.
Yes. The website is hayleychewins.com. That's my name. And and you can pre-order I Am the Swarm from anywhere that you pre-order books. I would really appreciate it if people pre-ordered, because it really makes a difference to authors. Mm-hmm. And is there anything else? I'm not actually on social media anymore. I deleted my Twitter quite recently, it was just feeling like a very negative space, and I wasn't into it anymore. So I don't have anything else, just my website at the moment.
I understand that. And who needs social media when you have a beautiful little baby?
Yeah, exactly. Who has the time?
That's right. Yeah. We've had a great time speaking to the author of I Am the Swarm. It's a new YA novel in verse from our guest, Hayley Chewins. Hayley, thanks so much for being on Reading with Your Kids.
Thank you so much. I love chatting to you, and yeah, it's been about I Am the Swarm, and hopefully we'll chat soon.
Hey families, would you like to share a miracle with your kids? At the Wolf Conservation Center, hope was fading. The endangered Mexican wolves dreamed of a pup, but none had come. Until one tiny miracle changed everything. Meet Trumpet, a real-life wolf pup whose incredible birth brought joy, hope, and a lesson in conservation. Trumpet the Miracle Wolf, written by Leocadia George, is a heartwarming true story that will inspire your whole family. Teach your kids the power of hope, love, and protecting endangered species. Get your copy today and join the wild adventure. We're really excited. Our guest today is returning to the Reading with Your Kids podcast is Kate DiCamello. She's here to celebrate her latest middle grade novel, The Beatrice Prophecy. Hey, Kate, welcome back.
Oh, thank you. You make me sound much more exciting than I actually am. But I'm glad to be back with you again.
Well, I'm really excited to have you back, and The Beatrice Prophecy sounds really exciting to me. Tell us a little bit about it, please.
Yeah, it's a book about a lot of different things. So it's got seahorses and mermaids and goats and bees and kings and queens and counselors and prophecies and stories upon stories upon stories. But mostly it's the story of a girl named Beatrice who can read and write in a time and place when it is against the law for girls to read or write. And she becomes friends with an orphan boy named Jack Dory, and also with a man who used to be king named Kinnock, and with a monk named Brother Edic, and with a goat whose name is Enswellica. And these friends, in the end up changing things dramatically, but I won't say how. And I won't say whether or not the prophecy comes true. So it's kind of a fairy tale, a little bit of a fable, maybe.
Well, we always talk about what kind of conversations families can have when they're reading a particular book together or co-reading a book together. The first thing that jumps out to me, Beatrice is able to read in a time and a place where it was against the law for girls to be able to read. And that exists today.
Yes, it does.
And I think that's a really important and powerful conversation for families to have, I think.
I think so too, and I also think just this, on a very personal note, when you write a book, you never, or I don't, I'm never really certain exactly where the story is coming from or how it ties into me personally. But when I finished this and it went into galleys, and then I started to think about, okay, now I'm going to have to talk about where it came from. And one of the first things that popped into my head was I was super lucky in that I had a mom that read to me all the time and an older brother who would also read to me. But I was one of those kids who was just desperate to learn how to read for myself. And when I was growing up, they didn't teach you how to read in school until first grade. And so I went like trotting off to first grade first day thinking, oh boy, I'm going to come back and I'll know how to read. And of course, that was not correct. And even more than that, this thing that I wanted so much kind of like receded, the closer I got to it, because, the school system where I was then was teaching kids to read with phonics. And, for whatever reason, it did not, It just made no sense to me. It wouldn't click in my brain. And I remember coming home from school and collapsing in front of my mother and kind of weeping, because I was so desperate to learn to read, and I didn't understand what they were talking about. And my mother, when she finally got the scope of the problem, said, oh, calm down, for the love of Pete. We'll work around it. That's what she said. And she also said, you're smart. You're good at memorizing. We'll just work around it. And she made me flashcards. So she wrote a word on each flashcard. And every day after school, I would come home and she would go through this huge stack. She would tell me what the word was. I would memorize it. We would do it again and again and again. And that's the way I learned to read. And, I didn't fully feel like myself until I could read. And once I could do it, I felt like anything was possible. And so that story of me learning to read, even though I didn't come from a time and place where it was against the law, it was this thing of I saw how much it empowered me, the written word. And everybody, that individual empowerment through being able to read and navigate the world through words and stories, I feel like everybody should have that,
Absolutely. And what a beautiful gift that your mom gave you, because there's so many other teachers and parents at that time who were probably doing the opposite and just saying, hey, you ain't going to do it. You ain't going to get it. Sorry. And those kids grew up in a very different way. So I'm really thankful that you had a mom that had that foresight and that love for you to do the workaround.
Yeah, and the beautiful thing about it too, when I look back on it, is that it sends an implicit message too, which is, that I carried with me without even being aware of it, which is, okay, this way doesn't work. Try another way. And that is a great lesson for a kid to get, as opposed to, no, this is the only way that you're going to learn to read. And if you don't learn this way, you're not going to learn. And, you're right. A lot of parents would have said, oh, well, you'll get it. We'll work on phonics, right? That's probably what a lot of parents would do. But my mother was able to, and it was very much who she was, step off the beaten track and go, well, what's up? Let's just do it a different way.
Yeah.
And it was a really good lesson for me. But the thing too that, and you understand this and talk about it as much as I do, it's just that thing of being able to pick up a book and read it, can change your life, because nobody can tell you anymore. You can do it yourself. It is so empowering, and it's just something that I want everybody to have.
Yeah, absolutely. And I learned how to read with phonics, and I first married my beautiful wife, who's a teacher, a special needs teacher. I was, you got to get that hooked on phonics thing, and everybody can learn phonics, so easy. And now I'm, coming out of my ignorance and learning that, we have 26 letters in the alphabet, but we have over 44, I think the word is phonemes or sounds that make up our English language. And there's not enough letters.
Right. And, and it's also that thing of, this is not me railing against phonics. I think phonics works great, but everybody's brain is different.
Right.
It's like, what's the way in? What works for you? How does your brain work? And so there's not a right way for everybody. It's just like, it's how your brain works.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I'm loving the fact that we're coming to a point in our history where we're recognizing and really starting to recognize that people are different, and that's a good thing, that diversity is a wonderful thing. It adds to our culture. It adds to each other. And we need to make the effort to kind of change the way we teach, change the way we interact with each other to really help everybody become the person they're meant to be.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I totally agree. Yeah. I totally agree.
So that's a great place for families to start, just having that conversation about what a gift being able to read is and how we still need to work hard to make sure reading and literacy is available to everybody around the world. And there's so many people that don't have a chance. Even here in the United States, there are people who aren't able to get the help they need to become literate. What are the kind of stories, conversations do you think families can have as they're reading the Beatrice prophecy?
I think that you can also talk about the importance of friendship, and that there are people, no matter what terrible situation you might end up in, you can find somebody who you can trust. And this is like, I was talking to somebody the other day who had just finished reading the book and pointed out this thing to me, which happens quite a bit when I tell stories and I don't always see the thematic links from story to story. But she said to me, in every story that you write, adults are so fallible, but there's also always an adult that is absolutely trustworthy. And it's so good for kids to know that they can find those, because that was my experience as a kid. Was, I had neighbor, ladies who, 3 widows that lived on the opposite side of the street from us, three older ladies who really welcomed the neighborhood kids into their house and were interested in us and listened to us. And what a wonderful thing it is to have your parents are spectacular. And it's also great to have another adult in your life that you know that you can trust and that you can figure out who you are with, and this happens with Beatrice. There's the monk brother Edic, who is a spectacular human being and who sees Beatrice for who she is, and also Kennick, the man who used to be king. And not everybody's going to find a goat to rely upon, but Answelica is the most reliable goat in the world. So it's this thing it's a great thing to talk about finding those people who you belong to in the world. So it's just, that's your family, but it's also the larger world. You will find family, people who you know instinctually that you can trust and who will come and get you no matter what. And those people are out there. And part of storytelling is to make you look out at the world and something that always preoccupies me, and I can see how it shows up in my books. This is one of the things that I'm aware of, is that you walk past so many people without knowing who they are or what's inside of them. You walk past people, you walk past squirrels, something that I stated explicitly in Flora and Ulysses. It's like, who knows what marvels hide inside the most mundane looking squirrel, right? And so stories are a reminder always to pay attention to the people around us and the miracles that they contain.
I love that idea. And I think it's really kind of an old way of looking at the world. It seems these days that everybody, not just kids, but everybody is really kind of withdrawn. And, I was mentioning this to my beautiful wife. We were reflecting back on last year when everybody was wearing masks and trying to be socially distant. And so when we were walking the dog and someone was coming up the other direction on the sidewalk, oftentimes either we or they would step off and give us each other that social distance, but they seem to be afraid to make eye contact and to just wave and say hi.
I am such a fan of eye contact.
Yeah.
I won't be able to find the passage in the Beatrice prophecy, but Kennick, the man who used to be king and walked away, decided that he was never again going to look at any face without seeing it fully. And I think about that all the time. I heard somebody, I cannot remember who this was, but I use it, and I used to use it all the time, like when I was traveling in crowded airports, and just a way of meditating instead of like looking at your phone, to like watch each face that goes past you, and to say, bless you, bless you, bless you. And it's great because when you look at each face and you're not going to make a judgment about the face, rather you're just going to like bless the humanity of them, then it just like it changes something inside of you. So, and that's something that I still do on walks. When I see, cars going past, people, I'll say it to trees, I'll say it to squirrels, and I say it to people's faces. I just think it, bless you, bless you, bless you. It's just a way to get out of my own way, and also to see, the world.
It is a great point you make. When we bless others, it really it helps us. It gives something wonderful to us.
Right. It takes us out of ourselves. So if I'm standing there, as it used to be so often, thinking, wow, this plane is not going to leave on time, and I'm going to have to speak at X time, and there's no way, none of it's going to work out, right? That kind of, that hamster wheel of travel. And so if I start just looking at the people and their faces walking past and paying attention to each face and thinking, bless you, bless you, bless you, then I'm not like on that hamster wheel of worry, which there's nothing that I can do about it anyway. The plane's either going to leave on time or it's not. It's not within my control. It is within my control to see all those people walking past me.
Yeah. I was interested that one of your characters is a king who walked away from power. It seems to be so hard for people these days. Was there any particular inspiration for that character?
Yeah, I do not know where that king, again, it's always this thing with me. It's like, where did that come from? I don't know. I just know that he actually, without giving away too much of the story, he walks out of the castle one day, and it feels so good that he just keeps walking. And the further away he gets from the castle, the happier he is. And by the time Beatrice meets him, he's living in the forest and in the hollow of a tree, and is a totally happy person. And I love him. It's like there are characters sometimes that I've always wanted to go and sit in Gloria Dump's backyard, and because of Winn-Dixie. And I wish that I could go and sit in Canuck's tree in the woods and have him look at me, and I could look back at him.
Yeah. So I think it's a really important lesson for all of us. Not only if you're a king and you're not happy to walk away from it, but there's so many things that we feel we can't walk away from, whether it's material possessions or being on that hamster wheel that you mentioned about earlier and making that money. It's a great lesson, I think, for our kids to learn from us, that it's okay for you to make a value judgment and to decide that, no, this isn't making me happy. It's not making my family happy. I have to do something else.
Yeah. And who am I in the world, and how do I want to be in the world? And that brings us back to stories, because I think that's what every good story helps us ask about ourselves. Who am I, and who do I want to be?
That's a tough question, I think, for a lot of people to ask themselves, and even harder for them to answer sometimes.
Right. But, again, it's like I talked about this when I was out on the road for Beverly right here, about this. There is this thing that happens in books where you watch characters decide to change, and that lets you know that you can change too. And so you might not be asking yourself the question, who am I? Who do I want to become? But story after story, when you see people make choices and go in a different direction, walk away from the castle, you think that's possible.
Mm-hmm.
I can change who I am.
Yeah. So important. One of the things that I was reading on the notes from your publisher, it was a wonderful quote. I think it says, we shall all in the end be led to where we belong. We shall all in the end find our way home. Where did that come from?
Well, in the story, because it's like, where did it come from? It's another one of those mysteries. In the story, where it comes from is, so Beatrice, at the beginning of the book, has amnesia. She only knows her name, and she doesn't remember anything that's happened before she wakes up at the monastery. She's in the barn, and the monks soon realize that she can read and write, and they're terrified, and also disbelieving, because they've never seen a girl who could read or write before. And so she does this thing where she proves to them, that she can write, and those are the sentences she writes, what you just read. And, she herself, when she writes them, doesn't know where they came from, but they're actually from a story that somebody read to her. And she doesn't remember the story at that point. She just remembers the words of the story. And Candlewick has made a beautiful book trailer for this book. And Sophie Blackall, who did all of the art for the book and who's Australian and has this beautiful accent, narrates the book trailer. And she reads those lines. And it's enough to like knock you over. It's so beautiful. And it promises so much. Sophie's voice is so gorgeous, and there's just a real promise in those words, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is a real hopeful. It fills me with hope, and it's certainly something that I experience in my life. We were talking earlier before we started recording about the fact that I just came back from performing for a group of kids, and 30-something years ago, I was led to the stage having never thought about performing in my life. I was a social worker and just at one point decided I needed to walk away from there, and I didn't know where I needed to go to, but some wonderful power led me in the way that has made me happy for an awful long time.
Away from the castle, as it were, and out into the woods.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this is wonderful. I'm really excited. I think the Beatrice Prophecy would be a phenomenal book. I can imagine middle grade kids just devouring this. Is there a plan to make this a series?
Oh, I don't think so. I never think in terms of series. That's a really interesting question. No one's asked that yet. You know what I was just thinking was maybe I should read a little section.
Yes, please.
To you. So when Beatrice becomes friends with Jack Dory, the boy Jack Dory, she's kind of like astonished that a boy her age can't read and write, because it's not only that it's against the law for girls and women to read and write, but it's that people in general don't know how to read or write. It's only the people in power who do. And so Jack Dory doesn't know how to read or write, and Beatrice decides she's going to teach him. So it's chapter 34, and she and Jack Dory are in that tree that Canuck lives in the woods. Each letter has a shape, Beatrice said, and each letter has a sound. And you put these shapes and sounds together and they become words. Do you understand? Aye, he said to her. His heart was beating fast. He did not know. He had not understood how much he wanted it to know this secret of letters and sounds and words. But his heart, pounding against his rib cage, was telling him. He and Beatrice were bent together over a piece of parchment, and Swellica was leaning over them, staring down at the parchment too. She gave off a tremendous smell of goat. You, said Jack Dory, are in my way. He gave Answellica a small shove. She butted her forehead against his, shoving him back. Canuck was gone. Where he had gone, they did not know. He was off on whatever mysterious errand a man who had once been king and was king no more might need to attend to. It begins with this, said Beatrice. This is the letter A, and it is the first one. She formed the letter. A, he repeated. He smiled. There are 26 letters in all, she said. You will learn each of them, and once you know them, you can mix them as you will, and then use them to form the words of the world and the things of the world. You can write of everything, what is, and what was, and what might yet be. Jack Dory nodded. The inside of Canuck's tree was snug. There was the smell of beeswax burning, and also, of course, the smell of goat. The bee buzzed around Jack Dory's head, Granny Bibspeak beside him, saying, Learn it, my beloved. Learn it all, light of my heart, river of my soul. A is for Abelard. That is my family name. A is also the letter that begins the name Answellica. The goat let out an approving grunt. The next of the 26 is B. She bent her head and formed the letter. B is the first letter of my name, Beatrice, and from there to C. What word begins with C? Asked Jack Dory. Canuck, said Beatrice. And when will we get to the Jack Dory letters? Soon, said Beatrice. He watched the letters appear one by one beneath her hand, and he felt as if each letter were a door pushed open inside of him, a door that led to a lighted room. The world, said Beatrice to Jack Dory, can be spelled.
Wow.
So, yeah, and that's that feeling of each word was a door that led to a lighted room. Boy, that's the way it felt when my mom was doing those flashcards with me.
Yeah, that was immediately the image that I got when I heard those words. Each letter is a door that leads to a lighted room. Beautiful. And I think that this is a really powerful way to kind of wrap this conversation up and to remind our kids that each letter, each sound, each word, each time we open up a book, it's like opening up a door to a beautiful future.
Yeah, I agree with that sentiment wholeheartedly. Yes.
Wow. Well, I know people are going to want to know where they can go to learn more about the Beatrice Prophecy and also more about all the wonderful work that you've created.
I have a website, which is kdcanella.com, or you can go to Candlewick's website to see all of my books. And I also, I post on Facebook once a week. So you can go there and read more about the books and when the books are coming out. And before we finish, I want to say how grateful I am to every parent, aunt, sibling, grandparent, librarian, teacher who reads to a kid, and to remind the kids that they can also read back to the adults.
Yeah. And also, if parents, you're listening out there and you have a kid who really loves to read, I don't know if they do it anymore, but one of the things that I spent hours doing when I was in middle school and high school was just tutoring younger kids and helping to open those doors for those kids who might be having trouble reading in school. It's never too early to start to share.
To give somebody. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
We've had a wonderful time speaking to the author of the Beatrice Prophecy, Kate DiCamillo. Kate, thank you so much for being back with us today.
It was a real pleasure. Thank you for listening to me read to you.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Reading with Your Kids. Well, join us for the next exciting episode of the show. In the meantime, we'd love for you to join us on social media, facebook.com/readingwithyourkids, at Reading With Your Kids on Instagram, and at GentlyMagic on X. We have a great YouTube channel, youtube.com/readingwithyourkids, and we have a great website, readingwithyourkids.com. Want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful, starting with our guest, Hayley Chewins. Please be sure to check out her YA novel in verse. It's called I Am the Swarm. Also want to thank Katie Camello. Kate's been on the show 2 or 3 times, and it was lovely to recall that conversation that we had with Kate about a year ago, and I am really looking forward to her coming back on the show in the future. I'm looking forward to Hayley coming back on the show in the future, and we're looking forward to having you listen to every episode of the show. I also want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Chris Doherty, Rory Grady. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you for taking the time to join us today, and thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place. And you do that every time you read with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next episode of Reading with Your Kids.